that I fill his mighty shoes. So I'm going to do my best to get this meeting started and keep it moving. So I will call this meeting to order, and I guess we'd start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Does anybody want to do it?
I did it last
Debbie,
time.
Debbie.
I'd be honored. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And with that, we would welcome Debbie Norris back to the fold.
Well, thank you.
So nice to have you here.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
There was much rejoicing. So I guess I would be looking for an approval or someone to make a motion to approve the minutes for the September 8th.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion of that? Any corrections? So then I guess that is approved. Oh, wait, we got to vote?
Good evening.
So all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? And on we go. Approval of sealing of the non-public session minutes of August 11th. We did not do that last time?
No.
Okay.
Sent them out last time.
Okay.
Sent out.
So somebody want to make a move?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion of the sealing of the non-public session minutes of August 11th, 2021? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Sounds like it carries. Moving on, so Hopkinton School District, the CIP and financials, and I know Norm, you got some things you'd like to talk to us about, so I can turn that over to you.
Sure, thank you. Thank you. So one of the things we did last year as part of the school board was that we created a CIP and a finance that was important to the district. And last year through our budgeting process, we gave the budget committee basically an overview of what we're currently doing, what's been revamped, and really kind of give them an idea of how it's changed and how we're trying to improve it for budgeting for years to come. So tonight I asked the chair of the CIP committee, Delcy, to join us to give an overview of what they've been working on, how it's looking, and once it gets qualified there with the town. We just started our budget process, which I will discuss shortly after the presentation. But I am happy to turn over to Delcy. Thank you for coming tonight to share you and Rob's work that you shared with the Hopkinton School Board.
Hello, everybody. Good to see you all. We are getting up and rolling with the presentation so that everyone at home can see it. But I'll get started. Okay. Get started with just an overview. I think most of you here are very familiar with CIP and sort of what the town does. And we're trying to sort of get up to speed with the school district for both short-term and longer-term visibility into our physical resources and assets and how we want to continue to maintain and improve them over a period of decades, hopefully. So for people who might be listening at home, we'll talk through just a quick overview. We'll look at what our CIP process is. We'll go through some keynotes. We'll start the overview of what the fiscal year 23 requests are going to be to provide some visibility, and then we'll talk through next steps. This is all with one caveat. Tonight's presentation will be pretty quick because the town CIP committee is currently in the process of reviewing all of the requests from both the town and the school districts, and so they're going to be providing feedback to us about our plan, and we will see what they say. So I think some things might change, but we just wanted to let you know where we are with the process. If that sounds good. Okay, great. Here we go. I got it. I have some muscle memory, sort of. Okay, so basically, this is where we are. So for the purpose of,
I'm just gonna share screen.
thank you,
So that it's on the video.
thank you. For the purposes of the CIP, just trying not to slow everyone's time. As well. Perfect. These are defined in the context of the town and the district as well. Being something that has a gross cost of at least $10,000, a useful life of at least 5 years. It's non-recurring, so we don't want to be putting things that are in the annual budget process into the CIP, and also any project requiring bond financing. So ideally, sort of not paper, things like that, but sort of bigger ticket items that we might want to do. So what we are hoping to do is, and what we're in the process of doing, is developing a forward-facing CIP plan with input from administrators, facilities. So that's the principals, that's Michelle at the SAU, who you all know very closely. It is from the facilities team, from teachers, even to say that we wanted to be able to think about what these facilities are going to need, what we need for education. This is what we want to look at. We work with the admin team to review and prioritize. I report to the school board basis, at least quarterly in a formal way, but more often monthly, especially as we're moving through this budgeting process. This then gets reviewed, which we're currently undergoing, as I mentioned, with the timeline CIP, and then we either begin work or move to start to raise funds through a warrant if need be, through the March sort of school district meeting process. Really quickly, just in terms of SAU 66, we have just over 158,000 square feet of square footage, which is kind of wild from an asset perspective. The replacement cost per square foot is $300, and so depending on what we're looking at, whether it's our insurance carrier Primex, or if we're just looking at that per square foot cost, we're either between almost 35 million or close to $48 million. So we have a significant asset base that we want to make sure that we are continuing to invest in and maintain, knowing that this is one of an asset that has been provided by the town, right? The recommended capital renewal ratio is about 2% per year. And so if you were looking at an ideal amount of investment that you would spend based off of the value of the schools, we would be spending between $693,000 or $951,000 per year. I think most superintendents in the state can tell you that no one does that. That's a pretty heavy load to ask the taxpayers to do. But you want to be mindful of, if we're really trying to maintain the value of the properties, we would be looking to invest a significant amount year over year. That's just to keep in mind, not realistic. But we want to move up to being able to have a nice space to do that. So for our maintenance trust, and sorry, there's a line through here. Right now, our maintenance trust, which is what we call our sort of CIP account, is at just about $166,000. We added $150,000 last year as part of the budget. However, we're taking up $42,500, which is for essentially a lease financing cost that we're still paying down, I think, for one of the boilers. So right now we have $274,000 in our maintenance trust. For fiscal year 22, we have 194 coming out of that, which will leave us with $122,000. We're earmarking another $150K to go in, which brings us back to 272. And based on the expenditures we want to do, we're looking at hopefully spending about $350,000 in the next fiscal year, which leaves us about 80K short. I'll run you through what sort of those look like, and I'll take you through the plans so you can sort of see, and this is something that the town is going through as well. Part of what we really want to do is think about, I think this is an important thing for this committee to know. We want to think about this year, but we also want to provide visibility for the next 3 years as we're making some changes to the way we think about budgeting and planning for the finances of the school district. So we want to get to a pretty stable ask so we can start to build up a little bit more of a balance in our maintenance trust, plan for some of the items that are coming down. And then we want to be able to look at what do we think about the next 20 years, next 10 years, and what does that look like? The big thing that we have to keep in mind as part of this is that we have a significant number of bigger ticket items, boilers, HVAC systems, et cetera, that are due for maintenance or replacement in the next 2 to 3 years. And while interest rates are low, one of the things we're thinking about is, do we want to look at a bond option to possibly do that in one fell swoop, while we can take advantage of cheaper cash So I'll work through some of that. I think this is so. Okay, so just really quickly, this document, and this is a dense document, you can access it anytime on the school district website. And it's a live document, so every time we meet, we make some adjustments and those are immediately reflected for anyone in the community to see. This is all the basic information that we just went through. And then we go through on a school by school basis. You are able to see any prior work that's been done. We have historical copies going back to fiscal year 12 if you wanted to see any work that's happened. And then you're able to see projection wise what's happening through fiscal year 35 on a typical basis. Line items that are in here, they have typically, worth noting, the district has typically put in classroom furnishings just because it gets cut from the budget every single year. This ideally would not be something that comes out of our CIP. This is something that we're looking at. But basically, if you look at fiscal year 23 for Harold Martin, you might remember that a lot of work was done from the facilities project, but they need a new walk-in refrigerator and freezer, which will be $24,000. And then there is the boiler is due for replacement. Worth noting that the boiler might not fail, but it is responsible, I think, for us to allocate, given that all of the boilers are basically due replacement for the next 2 years, that we should set aside some money so that if it does fail, we can keep the building where it is. But basically, you can go through, you can look at Maple Street, same deal here, where you can see we've got some skylights that need to be replaced sort of on the entry to Maple Street there. And then you can go ahead and look at the middle high school as well. This is all fairly standard for the most part. The biggest thing is the boiler at Harold Martin. But you can go through all of these tabs and also see what's needed for the SAU. SAU, just so everyone knows, needs some love. We're looking at 3 different plans to be able to look at, are we refurbishing the SAU as it is? Are we thinking about extending the square footage to provide for our needs? Are there other properties that we could look at that would be more cost effective for the town? Anytime we look at something the fiscal 23 year, we contact, try to bid it out, get the best possible price estimate that we can, put these numbers in, and then we go from there. Does anyone have any questions about this piece? I don't. So we know that the format is sort of challenging. We are working on it, I will say. But basically, if you look at this tab, you can go ahead and see all of the things that are sort of collapsed into the fiscal year 23 column. What that looks like in essence is, again, that HMS boiler, which will run about $143,000. The walk-in and fridge freezer replacement, skylights, paving at the middle high school, a fridge at the middle high school, sound system at the middle high school, HVAC controls, and then that performance contract, which is literally just paying down an equipment lease financing contract. So that puts us at about 352K as I mentioned. So what we're going to be trying to figure out is of this 352K, we don't necessarily want to draw the entire maintenance trust balance to zero. So if we're thinking about being able to add a little bit extra in there, and so trying to think about what will be the ask on this year's budget process for our warrant, what would be the visibility for looking 2 years out to get us to a stable position, what would a possible bonding process look like in the next 2 to 3 years to take care of some of those other big ticket items, and how do we really start to plan for a more significant allocation so that we can hopefully be doing more proactive maintenance rather than huge lump deferred maintenance projects that cost more when it comes to interest down the line. The goal is to think about how can we maintain our assets, protect them, also make sure we're planning financially responsibly for the taxpayers. Questions? Yes.
Not a question, I just want to thank you for doing this.
Yeah.
I think it's a huge step in the right direction and provides a lot more transparency
Yeah.
to the process.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, again, like that spreadsheet is you don't love Excel, you might not love that spreadsheet. We're trying to think about a way that people could sort of ingest that information in a better way if they're not necessarily living in a spreadsheet every day. But there's so much information that's in there. And our facilities administrators and Michelle do a really good job of trying to plan out. And, you know, I'm thrilled to be able to like showcase their work. Yeah. Yes.
Will the Harold Martin School furnace continue to be number 2 fuel oil, or will you be looking towards wood pellets with any new furnace?
Great queue. A few people have been asking, so we've been talking to the 5 hours and students for 100. One of the things that we do want to start to do is evaluate if we could start to move to more sustainable fuel options. And since we have all the boilers coming up, it's a great time to do it. It's worth noting, out of the vehicle maintenance trust, we do have to replace the short bus. So we sent out an RFP for regular gas, propane, and for electric. They might not exist. We're hoping that they do. One of the things we're going to look at is sort of the cost benefit analysis of moving to a different type of fuel. How will that impact social goals, but also like, what do we actually have to do over time? Yeah.
Also, do you have any idea of what size loan we'd be looking at?
I think when I tallied it all up, it's right about $2 million. So I think we could probably get it. It would be 150 to 2 million, depending on sort of where the final quotes come in. That's a lot of them are boilers and HVAC stuff, so it depends on the energy solution we look at.
Thank you.
If I could just add a comment on the wood pellet boiler. The select board had a tour of the DPW building in town, which has a wood pellet boiler. And Dan Blanchett, our director of DPW, does not speak warmly.
Yeah, there are, so I think.
I'll just leave it at that. And, you know, I would suggest if you're going down that route, talk to Dan.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. We also have gone to look at some solar installations. There's some maintenance stuff there. It's trying to figure out like what is going to be fuel cost over time, what is going to be maintenance cost over time, what would be sort of like replacement cost over time. And if we can forecast that out, knowing the total lifetime value of the product, then we can figure out where do we end up at the bottom line.
The concern on the boiler or the projection is that it might be like 2023 might require replacement. Like that's this, obviously nobody has a crystal ball, but that's.
It's like, well, hopefully.
Right.
So, but we want to make sure we've got funds allocated. So if it does, we can cover it.
Just one of the thoughts that came to my mind is because we were in the process of a stove dying and having to get out there, and the costs are so much higher today.
So much.
Because of that. So we're allocating based on where inflation and everything has taken us.
Yep.
And, you know, hopefully costs might come down.
Yep.
I'm just wondering how much of that is being considered in all.
We've been talking about it. That's a really good point. That cost would be for not this fiscal year that we're currently in, but the next one out, at which point, like, hopefully the world will have stabilized and the courts will be normal. Who knows? So I think one of the things that Michelle is actually really good at, she tends to keep, like for example, for fuel costs, she'll keep a running 3-year tally to be able to look what that is. She has multiple quotes over the years that she tries to pull in to be able to see like pre-pandemic supply chain issues, current, and then we can start to go from there.
And then if I could, another question. When you're looking at the type of burners and the solar versus the wood, is there a committee that's looking at all aspects? And
Not right now. Mike has met with the students for 100 in the 5 hours. I've met with them, Andrew has met with them, Norm's met with them. We're trying to figure out if there is like a policy aspect that we want to do. And I think realistically, it'll be partially implemented through the CIP. And then part of it will be our policy things that we look at. Because it's also like, do we want to move to regular cutlery in the cafeteria instead of plastic and styrofoam, right? Like, so we don't have like a sustainability committee, but it's something that we are thinking about and Mike's trying to figure out how we approach it.
okay, thank you.
Hanover High School just implemented like 100% sustainable fuel plan, I think we just announced it.
What is their heating plan?
Yeah, it's like heating, electric, everything.
No, what is their heating solution? Do you know?
No, I can look. I was sent the presentation.
Oh, no. It would just be interesting, like at the point where the budget committee is actually kind of deciding on this to be able to like look at the finances of solar or something. equivalent
Yeah, I mean, there's
versus-
a lot of statistics where like the town is probably gonna be looking at it at some point, and if we can aggregate,
Right.
intel for sure, and then there's hopefully power and buying things together, so if there are shifts that are gonna be made, it could be interesting. But we're just, it'll be interesting, because a lot of our sort of power gen stuff has to be, power utilization of the equipment has to be fixed in the next 2 to 3 years. A lot of the students do want to actually move to like 100% on local, like on-prem power generation. And we're in the conversation of being like, that will have to happen over some period of time. It's just something to do. Yeah,
That's impossible.
that's, yeah, totally, yeah, totally.
A
Yes.
lot of solar panels from a
Lots.
school,
Yes. So.
like a whole field of them.
Yeah, so there's like a few things that it's like, how do you stage this over 20 years or 30 years?
You know, there's been discussions on, it's not necessarily the best place to put them on a roof per se, you know, and did you just put a new roof up, you know, it's what goes into that specific maintenance.
So, yeah, so this is a conversation that's just started that we are very happy with now. Yep.
I wonder also about like insulation. like,
Yeah.
Just in terms of conserving the heat that we,
Yeah,
presumably, I mean, again, those things are all cost money on the front end, and the question is, you know, the payback,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
there's a value component to it too.
Well, and that also, because we're looking at a lot of cooling options for the schools, for ventilation and for the summer, so it's
Right.
good there. There's something else I want to tell you. Ours. Yeah. If you have any questions, let me know. When we hear back from the town head committee, we'll sort of know how this lines up. We'll go from there. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you.
And then Norm, just so you.
Yeah, you can stay a little if you'd like, if you want to, even.
I'll see how.
Yes, you have the, do you mind if I go up there a little bit so I can project to you guys? You, okay?
No, you have to stay.
No, I'm,
It's against the rules.
no, you're right. So just a couple of things to discuss real quick. I'll discuss some of these. So, the building project, we are done. In terms of quotes, and what I mean by quotes is, right now we are currently going through a list of stuff that the administrative team have had to decide what needs to be repaired. That's basically under warranty. So if there's something that's not come correctly that they need to go by, there's a checklist that they go by, and they're gonna basically fix it, and then it's signed off, and then we have that warranty from BPS. The next big step of the facility project is this week, we should be receiving the money back from the project. I don't anticipate it being a substantial amount of money. Once this money comes back from BPS, which is which they hang on to as contingency, they give it back to us, and then this will be vented through my leadership team, and then brought to the building committee and then to the school board, which might help us through our budgeting process. I don't have a dollar amount yet, but again, through this whole building project, this budget committee has been aware of every single contingency dollar figure we have used for fire suppression, for many additional add-ons that we have done. And at the conclusion of this project, which is pretty much now, once we get these other additional things done, there will be a report to the town that will go through every single dollar that's been spent on this bond, which will show what's gone towards the value. So like the midterm report we received last year, the budget committee, you were able to see a timeline of the project, the dollar amounts, and what was gonna happen, which I thought was a great document to share and provide to the community. So I'm happy to say it's, again, quote, done, but we are getting closer and closer to just fine tuning some things, and that's the school district's responsibility to maintain its facilities. I think right here tonight that, again, thank you very much, Delsey, for coming. We have an opportunity to continue to invest into our school district facilities and maintain that. So I thought that's very important. So I would say tonight's a little unique. And by saying unique is about a month ago, Superintendent Mike Flynn and I came to the budget committee, so you guys can. And in that discussion, one of the discussions we talked about was having an updated discussion where we are in our budget process earlier. And part of that was, when we were talking to Mike through hiring a superintendent, he understood that Hopkinton had wanted to have more of an open discussion with the budget, more of a earlier budget process. And when Mike was hired, he had said he wanted to start the budget process in October. And I was really surprised that such a window had opened up. And I think this budget committee was a little surprised too. We've always gotten the budget in January. And when a budget is brought to the budget committee, it's usually polished, done, and you guys go back and forth and you guys determine whether or not you want to put that on the ballot for the town. So tonight, what I want to share with you a little bit about is the budget process has very much changed with a new board, with the new superintendent, and with support from the board and Mike. The budget process started in September, in which Mike instructed his team to come in with their figures, close to 0%, 1% or 0%, and deliver it to us, not to him. By that, superintendent, the school board, and the leadership team last week sat at a round table. And in that round table, each leadership team provided why there was an increase in their budget. They provided their wants and their needs, and it was a direct request to each board member of why. And in that discussion, we were able to ask questions, we were able to dig deeper, and basically have that direct relationship with them. And in that discussion, we would say, well, how much is that going to be? Mike's like, I don't want to talk about dollars. I want you guys to absorb the information that you're hearing tonight. Because he wanted to compile all this information and put it into one number so we could just see what our starting point of the budget is. And I really want to make that clear. What you're seeing here tonight is everything compiled from that discussion. Nothing's been approved. Nothing is being voted on next week. This is basically opening up our eyes to see what is in the future for us, for positions, for other areas that need to happen for the district. And once I bring you guys a number in November, we'll see a significant number that you're going to be seeing tonight, because tonight is all in, as opposed to the board discussing wants and needs in this position. So that was great. You got the overall budget. All right, perfect. So thank you for providing the slide. So as you can see in here, here's the overall budget process that we are working on for the FY 22-23. You can see on the 29th, the board introduced the budget process. Finance committee with Delcy and Rob worked well together in overviewing our goals and our priorities for the year and the budget process. And then last week, as discussed, we had our first budget working session. We get to hear from the administrators about asks for the upcoming year. So nothing's been turned down. They are submitting their budget, they're submitting their wants, and we're listening and asking questions. And then last night, the school board had its first meeting where we got to review a total ask with 0 cuts from administration and teachers. So basically, we have a complete overview of everything from that discussion on October 12th, all in one document to be able to understand what it would take to have all those wants and needs. And then the continued process down the road, we can see next Tuesday, we have our next meeting as a budget working session. We're going to start to prioritize the terms of product goals and possible looks at revenue. So throughout this short presentation, you're going to see some of the stuff that the board is going to have discussions with, stuff that we're going to have with the leadership team, and really zoom in on what we want in order to provide for the Hopkinton School District. Then we'll go back to the finance committee to review operating budget in terms of broader goals, as well as the overall financial aspects such as CIP and other things. And the board will meet again on the 26th to continue prioritization and allocation. And then our goal is 11-9, having a final operating budget. So it's a little unorthodox to come here before we actually have a number. We always come here and we're like, well, what was on the chopping block before we brought it here? It's kind of unique that we're bringing this to you guys to show you we're doing this earlier. You are seeing what has been compiled all through all our discussions before the superintendent, before the board has said no, before you have said no, before the community has said no, or yes, whatever it is, everything that's all in. Now, as a board, we will go into discussions and discuss that and determine what is fiscally responsible, what's best for the school district, what can the taxpayer, or it's stuff that we need to discuss moving forward.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right. So, right, is this how I do it? So, is it just go down? Oh, so I'm just gonna go through a little bit of the presentation that Mike Flynn did last night for us. He gave us a little bit of an overview of everything that's been added. So in the rest of the presentation, you can see budget drivers, projected enrollment, budget changes by department, required necessity increases of staff and overall budget. Again, this was his presentation to us, not a presentation to you. This is us seeing for the first time last night and me delivering to you so you guys can see our starting point. In this budget that was presented from Mike, with everything all in, you can see the facility bond project. On this part of this, again, every other year, the New Hampshire retirement, and then special education, tuition, and related services. Thank you, Dusty. Our projected enrollment, using this budget process, we can see the enrollment at Harold Martin 16. We can see Maple Street's 1 up, and we see the difference of 6 at the middle high school. So in a budget format, we're using 950 for 2022, 2023. So this right here is not static. This is only stuff that actually to open up our schools over. So we're talking about general supplies. GUX is a new reading program that has been asked by the by Bill Rosa, which helps improve our reading for our students, which I've heard great things about. That's 22,000. Some reading materials and some transportation. Again, it's not flat because this is subject to change. This is an overview of what we have been presented from Bill without any reductions or anything. Him advocating for these wants and these needs for these items. Maple Street, you can see an increase of 13,000 in there. Again, just stuff without staff. This is just for the students. We're talking about IXL math program, math materials, and then benchmark kits. Increase of 13,000. Over at the high school, you can see, 8th grade, poetry, algebra consumables, a bunch of other things on here, more textbooks than anything. As you can see, an increase of 17,000. Again, things that need to be upgraded for the students or learning, increase in textbooks and so forth. Special education, I think that is a big number that you can see right there, that there is an increase in contract services, tuition, and transportation. Yes, there is a change of $329,000. I cannot confirm what exactly is in that 329 change. I think that's the superintendent would have to answer, but it is important that this number is always subject to change. If someone's coming into our district and there needs to be services provided to them, and the school district has to, that is that's a number that could change. But again, as of October 12th, this is what is being presented to the board. Again, the overview before we do anything, before you guys ask for more. At that point, this is the beginning process for us that we've not done before, that we're trying something new that's been supported by the board, superintendent, have this budget committee see what we need to do. Next thing is the facility. You can see that major increases is AC at the library, which is 15,000. Electricity, fuel, in the building project. That is an increase of 92,000. That's everything combined. Let me make sure I got that right. No, it's not. that is that's just actually the facility. And in that, Rich, yesterday I did ask about a study on alternative fuel solutions, so we were thinking the same way. With increasing costs and how we are eating things and all that, I am curious about alternative fuel for the district. It's been asked multiple times, and we do have some people talking about that. And I'll look at that. So it's important. Technology budget, as you can see right here, is a subscription for Aspen, which is about $3,000. The Chromebooks is basically a budget amount to repair books. You know, the goal of the budget process is to really budget for what money we need to use. In a sense, eliminated non-reserve fund balance. So in Matt's budget, he is confident that $9,000 will cost is allocated for strictly just repairs for the school district. There's a one-time fee for access fees of $5,000. So in his technology budget, it's about $19,000. So in this district school change budget, you can see the step track movement of 2,400, single audit of 6,000, legal fees 9,000. E-finance has a subscription of $2,400. You can see the bond in there. You can see interest, and you can see food services. There's $149,000 in there, which is a change of 282,000. So this is very eye-popping. I think when I first saw this, it was very interesting to see in a column. These staff and budget changes are basically the wants and needs from every department that has been asked. For example, the SAU office is asking for a director of curriculum. Mr. Houston has notoriously said to me, what is the total cost compensation of hiring an individual in the school district, including insurance? If we were to hire a director of curriculum with insurance all in as a family plan, it would be $160,000. These positions up here for these budgets are not something that has been agreed upon, has not been said yes or no. This is the beginning stages that the board needs to discuss quite in depth. From additional support in fifth grade, for example, was funded through the ESSER account. Unfortunately, if we want to continue to have that specific position, we want to allocate a fourth teacher to the fifth grade. Currently, the fourth grade has 4 sections. I think something that was really important that was discussed in our meeting, which kind of hit home a little bit. It's very hard to attract teachers to a district when you're one and done. By hiring a teacher for fifth grade, we would have sections from K to 6, and you would have that consistent sections of class sizes and continue having that throughout. So instead of having a 1-year contract with one teacher, you're not going to recruit that teacher that maybe best for that position. So basically, this discussion will happen next week significantly with the school board, where we will sit down with Mike, we will sit down with the leadership team and discuss what we'd like to see moving forward in our budgeting process. And it'll be their job to come back to us at a specific amount that we deem acceptable, and kind of get to a number down the road, which would be November 9th from the school board. I think what was important for us as a board was to share this discussion that me and Mike had when we first came to the budget committee earlier this year. Give you guys an overview of where we're starting. We're moving up the deadline. We're moving this up so we can have this discussion. Just have this discussion with the community. And then when you look at the overall proposed budget, all in, you see a 7% increase. We all know that's not what's going to be coming here in November. I want to make that very clear. But what is important for the budget committee and for the community to understand that all the wants and needs for everyone in the district, you know, we can look back and we can say, you know what, we may not be able to have this this year. But we know back in 2022, 2023, when we were creating this budget, it's on the radar. We know that down the road, we are gonna need to fill our positions with these specific positions. So it's basically a historical document for us, improving our communication with the budget committee, with the community, saying we know what we need in order to improve our schools, improve the education of our students, and be fiscally responsible during that timeline in the next couple of years to come. Now, the board is coming up with a strategic plan. Jim and I will serve on that with Mike Flynn. This plan is not developed in our Hopkinton School District, which was something that the superintendent has made it a goal of his own to provide to this district, which will help improve our budgeting process, improving our facilities, improving our curriculum. And that will be a document that will be approved from the Hopkinton School Board that people will be able to see. So we are taking steps in order to get to a point where we're able to have this data, know what we need to do, and continue to have these goals. There's just a little bit of a graph that Mike presented to us to show us, salaries, benefits, sales, supplies, equipment, and other debt. Appreciation to the school board, and that's pretty much it. I do want to say that if you remove everything, I'll make sure I do this correctly, food services from the budget and staff, we're under budget already. You can open the doors, you're good to go. We're strictly already under. We're at 92,000 right now above last year to open up the schools and everything. But if you remove the food services, which is 149,000, we're under. Does that make sense? Because I thought that was a very good, interesting discussion that Mike brought up last night, that, we did a very minimal increase on the operational side for the students, for textbooks, from the leadership team. The driving factor that we're starting to look at, of course, is the early retirement, which is unavoidable, which we've talked about many times on here. And then we have, of course, the bond that's been promised to the town, which we all agree we're supporting. Well, it's part of our budget process, we have to support it. And the next stages is us discussing with the board in public, with the superintendent, what positions we want to fill that he feels is necessary for the school district. So in closing, this was to have a discussion, just a little bit of a preview of where we're starting. And it's something that I felt that was important. I feel it's important to know that I value everyone's time and everyone's communication in the budget process, that we're able to share. This is our starting point, instead of just saying, here's our budget. Because we together, it's your number that's going on the ballot, and you are part of the budget process, just like anyone else here. And I feel like that I'm very thankful that the board, as superintendent, was supportive to provide this little snapshot of where we ought to be. Yeah.
Thank you, Norm.
For this.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. It's almost like opening up the thought processes before they even start.
Yeah, and I want to make it clear, when you see 7% up there, it's not something that's been agreed upon. It's just strictly everyone putting everything in the pile, and now we have to sort through it, and that's our job as elected officials, and to work with the superintendent. When I come back, we can go back and we can look, and we can see the progression of the tough choices we had to make as a board in order to get to what we feel is a recommended amount to you guys to review and to discuss with the community moving forward.
A comment and a question.
Sure.
You're giving us something we've been asking for since I've been on the board: start early and be more explicit as to what the decisions are. So congratulations on that. I mean, you're months ahead of where we normally end up. And the question is, why do you call out food services as something unique that, you lumped it in with the two things, salaries and food services? If you didn't have that in there, food service is an expense, but why is that unique?
It's a very good question because it's been budgeted in a kind of unique way the past couple of years. It's been changed to the correct allocation right now to $149,000. Last year was budgeted for $1. And Michelle explained last night. which I'm-
Sorry, $1?
Yeah, last year it was budgeted
Okay.
last year for $1. And
Because of revenue or?
it was paid through other avenues through the balance. So that's what happened in that. But what our goal is, Dawn, is to present only budget items that are exactly what we need. So for food services, that is required in order to run our to have our schools, just like every other line item. You know, we're looking at focusing on not having a unreserved fund balance that's been high in the past. We understand that it's been a topic of discussion. I know it's been something that we've heard many times during the budget process. And it's something that the superintendent had said last night that he's looking to have a different budget approach, that if he wants to have something that's $250, that is what we're spending for $250. We're not going to find $251. This is what it is in our budget process. So at the end of the year, I'm hoping in the next 3 or 4 years, we'll see a trend on the unreserved fund balance that we see every year in our audit, going in the direction of this new budgeting process that we all want to see of management style when it comes to budget.
So can I just repeat? Sorry, go ahead, Don. So correct me if I'm wrong. So last year and previous years, the cost of, is it a third party that you contract with to do food service?
It's
Or is it?
Yeah, it was, I have to get back to how to explain it. I really want to explain it well, because Michelle explained it better than I can, and then that's one of the fun areas of Michelle. But they budgeted this year based on what has been passed, which is the 149.
And last year it was probably just not paid out of a line item. It was.
Correct, it was paid throughout other. So
Okay.
basically, this way, it is being what is on paper, what we're asking for, what we need, and what is.
Okay, I guess my question would be, if paid through other avenues in previous years, was that budgeted anywhere? In which case it shouldn't reflect necessarily a change in the
No,
total number.
I don't think it was done like in any funky way. I think it was like a budget transfer that happened, you know, the board approves or anything. And I think for learning this new budget process, you know, it's something where we're trying to produce a new whole system where we're able to say, okay, this is what it's going to cost, this is where it is, and it's really strict to, you know, there's no funkiness or anything like that. It's something where I had to check with Michelle again because I want to make sure I understood it. But in the sense, you know, that is what the amount that would not exceed.
It seemed like it was always sort of a set aside.
Right,
They funded it through the fund balance.
right.
Correct?
Yeah.
As an end run at the end, but it was always in the bottom line of the budget. It isn't like it's a new expense that we haven't seen before.
So you're seeing it front.
Right.
So you're seeing it right now in the budget process, eliminated from the unreserved fund balance.
It was like, you know, supplies or whatever. It's an item that's there every
Right.
year, but it's funded in the upper
Upfront.
part of the budget and a line item rather than, you know, coming around the bottom and saying, well, this is a.
Yeah, I just think it's an important distinction because then what you're saying is that it's not $150,000 increase.
It's not a new one. It's not a new one.
Right, yeah,
So I'm gonna have to
Sorry.
say, like, no, you're exactly right. So instead of having it go that way,
right,
it's forefront, here it is, this is how we're doing it. We're not looking to have any other ways
right.
of doing it that way.
Thank you.
And I gotta tell you on a personal level, of doing the budget last week with the leadership team. This is just me talking. It was great to be able to talk to them, to ask them questions. Why do you need this? And hear from the, you know, our superintendent is an expert, absolutely, but the people who are in those buildings day after day, why they need this, why they need to improve this reading, was so important to me because essentially, if something is not in the budget, you know, it really is, you know, someone in my position or the other four board members, you know, we're the ones that are saying no or yes. And that's what's really healthy about the discussion moving forward. You know, do we hire a curriculum director? Do we hire this position or 5 IAs. And I feel that it's a new approach, and us being able to share this with you just in the beginning to know what we're looking at. I encourage you all to watch our budget process. You know, it is all online, it is all streamed, it is recorded, it is open to the public. I don't think there's public comment, unfortunately, because it's a budget working session. You guys have public comment during working session? No, so so next week we dig deeper. We're gonna go through those positions, and then hopefully by November we'll have a number. I just think it's exciting that we're able to do this much earlier and be able to just have the discussion with you guys month after month throughout the budget process. Sure.
All right.
Well, thank you very much for this format. I really liked it.
Oh, good.
I really like.
I have a specific question though. Just more curiosity than anything. Why is a director of curriculum twice as expensive to hire as a teacher?
So that is a very good question. So when you look at salaries, you are looking at comparable districts. And so you're looking to see what, if they have a curriculum director or where others, and you look at what they develop. We are unpacking that actually next week. The board asked, a couple of other board members asked, how many other school districts have a curriculum director? You know, they are working in multiple schools. They're also developing curriculum for students who may have a different style of learning. So they're assisting every single part of the school district. I am not sure how their value is more than a teacher. That's probably my question, to be honest with you, but we are unpacking that more in depth as a board, because we want to understand the value of it, and we want to understand what other districts are using it, and kind of see if there was a change with it. I don't know, but since I've been on the board, that's been one of the positions that I've heard multiple times have been one of the missing pieces in this district that a lot of people were shocked we did not have. And I definitely need to dig more and ask more questions about it, but that was something that came from the SAU office regarding that position. The other one that I will say that I thought was that caught me off guard a little bit was the director of facilities. That was something that I felt that what's the director of facility? I thought that was Michelle's job, but it's actually this is a more of a complex job where you have somebody who is actually developing CIP, working on our facilities more and more. And Mike's going to be unpacking that more at that position for us. In our discussions at the board level and in the budget season, in the first budget session, it was alleviating a little pressure off Michelle. You know, Michelle is very busy, as you know, with a pretty big budget. But in this specific position, these are the two positions that came out of the SAU office, something that they're looking at. Again, we haven't agreed to anything. I still have a lot of questions, just like you all have a lot of questions. I have more, but again, together we'll all ask some questions before we come up with an end number. I just think it's great that we were able to put everything in there and see what our starting point is, instead of being blinded, I guess is the word. I don't know if that answers your question, but I mean, I'm going to get more information about it too, because I will tell you that number includes benefits. Too.
Sure.
Benefits,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the teacher includes benefits too, right?
Yes.
The fifth grade teacher.
Yep.
I would just caution that, you know, we're not spending a lot of money just for a title. You know, I mean, we've been able to.
Well, their responsibilities are being, and I think that's a great question to unpack on what they'd be doing. You know, developing a curriculum, I'm sure is a lot of work, especially when you do it across 3 school districts and for, you know, different needs and stuff. But I understand what you're saying.
Thank you.
Part of the sticker shock, though, I think, is when you're looking at maybe adding a teacher, you wouldn't be adding someone that was at maximum, because the maximum teacher is around 100,000 plus. And here you are probably adding a director of curriculum. I'm not justifying this, but you're hiring a seasoned one at the top of their level, perhaps. So that's why there might be, you know, the $60,000 difference.
I would also guess maybe education level required for that position.
Pardon?
I would also guess that education level for the person filling that position might factor into it too.
That's a director.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
You're gonna hire a senior one there, well, you wouldn't necessarily hire a senior teacher.
And, you know, there was a discussion, you know, I'd asked, was it possible to hire a curriculum director 2-year contract? And Mike had said that it's so important to have someone continue doing year after year, because it helps support each school in multiple ways. It alleviates a lot of work off our leadership team, so they can kind of expand their wings on other things that maybe they're not doing right now for their school. As you know, we're back at school, and it's been a great success, I'm happy to say. And you know, I think that with each and every single item on here, I'm confident to say, you know, it's about having that discussion specifically with the leadership team, with Mike, and ask them why. We will pick a couple of positions out of here, we may not pick any. And then that will really narrow down our budget significantly. You know, this majority of this budget increase specifically is only staff. That is strictly the discussion that we're having. You do have to remember that the finance committee is going to work their, is going to do their job. You know, Rob and Delcy have to look at what we have in other trusts, make a recommendation. You know, the board needs to discuss, are they looking at tax impact? Are they looking at budgeting increase? Because they're two different things. We all know that as a budget committee. What are we looking at in order to find what's a reasonable fiscally responsible budget? So you guys are just at the beginning, just like we are. And I just really appreciate you guys giving us an opportunity to share what we have, because again, I've always wanted to improve our communications with the budget committee, share what I know, and continue this trend of this is where we are. And like I always say, what I know, you guys know.
Norm, thank you for doing this. And it's great following the town's model. But thank you, Neil. I was curious, I don't know if I missed it. Are you making an assumption for increase in fringe benefits, percentage increase? Fringe benefits? Is that included somewhere in here?
Where was it?
It said,
It wasn't, it's
No,
not.
he's asking if you did.
Thinking about it.
Oh, are you talking about?
you're saying that you've got a 7% or so increase. I'm saying is fringe benefit increase built into
Do you mean for the SAU office and all that? Like
for every employee for health insurance. retirement.
So that number would be coming back. I don't know when that number is coming. But I mean, this is the starting point. I understand what you're talking about, like that arithmetic number.
So there were going to be cost pressures going up.
You know, honestly, Ken, I would have to check. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if that's already. Michelle's already got the number.
Yeah, I just.
It's like you're talking about the number coming back, you know, what they're gonna do for the year, there's an increase on that. I'd have to check, see if we got that. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Relatedly, weren't the teachers, to the point, aren't they redoing the isn't the contract up for?
That's the next question.
Okay,
But
yeah.
go ahead.
So I would, again, if we could confirm whether the salary contract increases from the.
Yeah, that is, you know, that is something that's a great question. So you're talking negotiations, right?
Yeah, because that
Yeah.
could make that 7% turn into like a 9 or something pretty quickly, right? If it's not already.
So that would be a different warrant. So that would be my understanding.
Okay.
So we would have the budget and then you'd have the warrant.
Right,
And
but you were probably.
so you're talking about tax impact. So
Right,
so essentially we'd have our budget,
right,
which is already included for next year. We'd have the agreed upon amount. And there was a new contract for the following year. Then you would have a separate warrant, which would have to be voted on by the town.
right.
I don't have an update on negotiations. That's something that's being worked on.
But I guess what I'm hearing is that when we look at that staffing budget changes page, that's almost $1 million,
Yep.
it's 936. There's assumptions in there based on the current benefits and wages.
That would be.
So all those numbers could increase depending on the negotiation. So even though that's a separate warrant, in this presentation, that number could inflate. Is the idea.
But would it fit for next year? So there's a
Oh, right,
contract that we
yeah,
voted on
right.
last year. The contract we voted on last spring. Yep. That goes into the budget that we're currently in, or does that go into 2022, 23 budget?
That would be going into this budget.
This budget, right? So whatever increases that are gonna happen due to teacher contracts and fringe benefits have already been voted on.
Okay.
And should theoretically already be in this budget.
Because we worked in the.
It's a 1-year contract, right?
Yeah, but that was for 21.
Right, okay.
So any contract you vote on. Let me write that down. If you're voted on 22, that's a 22.
Yeah, that's what I thought it happened too, but that always the issue where it doesn't show up in the budget until the following year's budget, because it's voted on separately, so it's not in the budget, and then it gets voted on and it pops into the budget, so it looks like a double increase. It's only increased once. Okay, sorry.
No, it's a great question.
So meaning that contract would affect.
So you're asking if the contract from last year is part of,
So we're gonna vote on a contract,
if we have a changes, yeah.
and let's just say it's a 1-year contract. So when we look at the tax impact this year, we're gonna look at the percentage on this, on the budget, and then we're also gonna have an additional increase from what we're voting on then. But the issue is that all what we're voting on then gets wrapped into the next budget, because that's where the contract goes. So then the following year, it's gonna look like another, like, let's say the teacher contract is 5%. So we're gonna have this budget, plus we're gonna vote on 5% of it. But then the following year, it's actually in that budget. So it looks like the budget's increased by 5%, but we already voted on it the year before.
That makes complete sense.
That's why it's weird.
No, that makes sense.
I
So,
think you're right.
so for this year, let's say we had a 0% increase on our budget. And we voted on, let's say, 2% increase for teachers. And the following budget we created, we would have those 2% raises in there already, we would have a certain percentage increase in the budget. We agreed
Right, but
on
we already agreed on it. So like when you present a 23-24 budget, there's gonna be an automatic 2% increase for that contract. But we already agreed on the 2% contract this year.
Got it.
That's why it's.
Got it.
But then also, and a question on the 0% increase. So when you're, I know
Let's
that.
say there's 0%.
No, I know. It's been a-
Take that from the minute.
it's been a constant theme though, that you guys are, the general target is a 0% increase. When you're talking about a flat budget, are you meaning like a $0 increase, or do you mean, and I know that's not what you're going to present, but as a goal, when you talk about a flat budget, you talk about it in terms of $0 increase, or you talk about it in terms of flat for inflation, just matching.
It's a great question. We haven't even had a discussion. To be really honest with you, we having the discussion, we talked about that last night a little bit about, we talked about tax impact, or are we talking about increasing the budget? Because as a board, there's really different avenues that direct the finance committee to look at. Come up with a way of having a zero impact, or find a way to go to find additional revenue in order to, eliminate an increase. People in this town, they have an opinion what they will for our budget and when it comes to increase of how it's sourced. And I think it's just important in this budgeting process that we walk them through where we get to this point. But I do want to check on that question for you, so I would definitely check on that. I always get a little messed up sometimes with doing a 2022-23 budget, but we're still just breaking the ice on this budget. So, but I will definitely get that information for you guys so we're clear on it. But I will say that the numbers in the presentation, though, for example, if you were hiring a curriculum director at benefits of 107,000 all in, and you negotiate a contract, this is all hypothetical, and you said they got to pay 20%, that of course would decrease a little bit on 170 because district only paid 80, they would pay 20, so that would go down. So if there was a negotiation, say on health insurance, hypothetically, then of course those numbers would go down, and we'd be looking at a different scenario on those numbers. So again, all great questions. I'm going to ask and clarify, but I just hope that this helped a little bit to give you a starting point of what we're trying to accomplish and our communication, which, like I said, was unorthodox. I don't think I've ever seen the board come to the budget committee, and but just from being here and sitting there many times, you guys have always wanted to have more sooner, and I think that's what we were trying to accomplish, just so you had it on your radar. So when you come November, December, we're discussing, and you're saying, hey, what happened to the director of the curriculum? We can say to you, you know what, Rich? We didn't think he was worth it, or she wasn't worth it. Just for us to be able to say, this is why we got to that. Basically, show work our magic to come down from 7% to just the responsible number.
A last question, not really on dollars, enrollment.
Yes.
How did you factor COVID into enrollment projections?
Great question. So as of right now, we had enrollment at 950 is what is, I think, was being reported next the end of this month to the Department of Revenue. And I think that's what they're using for right now. I believe for homeschool, if I remember correctly from last night's discussion, I think we had about 11 that are only homeschool right now for the pandemic affected number. So you're kind of looking at the trend of where we are and what we're doing in the past with enrollment. But, of course, that number, which you gotta remember, we also have to determine on the revenue side what we want to do for revenue from the state. Remember last year, we want to do 98%, or if we want to do, that's also an important number that we need to discuss as a board, like we did last year. So.
Just a related question to that, and if you already answered it, I apologize, but
No.
when you project enrollment, you have a 16 increase for Harold Martin, 1 increase for Maple Street, 6 increase for the high school. Like, how did you guys, where are those numbers coming from? That because certainly we've spent time in prior budget committee meetings discussing enrollment projections and whether or not they're accurate, and obviously those are big drivers. So, you know, where those numbers are coming from?
I want to answer correctly, so I'm going to ask.
Okay.
I think that's the best way to get you an actual good answer, and I think also to present that in our budget, you know, how we got that number, where we got it from. I don't know if it's from past trends. I don't know if it's what they're projecting for next year based on what we have right now. But as you know, a lot of people moving on. The house market's gone tomorrow. No questions about it, and enrollment can fluctuate. People moving out, so but I'll definitely look into that.
The other question that I had was, am I reading this right, that the special education budget is projected of decreasing?
Yes, correct. So that means there's services that I don't know what that's allocated to. Of course, it's information I'm not sure what I can release. I don't even know myself. But if there's a student no longer requiring services from the Hopkinton School District, it obviously is a reduction. I do want to caution any reduction that it's subject to change if someone comes into district. You know, that is a number, John, that could change between now and January. You know, when we make the warrant. I will say that the board has had discussions on how we can. I think Jim made the discussion about how we can budget the difference of that into our trust. So if something happens down the road and we need to be able to go into our trust of the savings, we have it there. I think it's important that we look at it as a decrease, but then we're not panicking to find it later down the road and something like that. There's a budget process that well known people do that.
It looks good at the snapshot right now, but only without going to take two children that moved in here, 2 individuals that could wipe that savings out,
Right,
just 2 kids.
right, and I'm.
That's probably the most difficult thing I would think for them to forecast.
I would think.
I mean, we have to meet the needs of the students. You know, Mandy, when she presented her budget to us, and I asked her, you know what, it was kind of a silly question because it would make you feel better and trust for students. She said, there's no competition alone to try to meet the students' needs. And I think that's very true. You know, you have someone come in and they need this, you know, we have to find a way to meet that student's needs. But in the budgeting process, if you ever decrease, in such a large number like that, it's important to maybe look at the path to the trust as something that could happen. I'm not sure what the board's gonna do, but I think Jim made a good point that you have a decrease, you look at trying to put that savings somewhere, so if something happens down the road, we have the resources to make it happen.
Other questions for Norm?
You guys are awesome. I thank you for giving me the opportunity just to speak to you guys about this. I do encourage you all to really watch our budget session next week. I know we're meeting with the select board on October 26th, which I think we'll have some financial discussions, probably about stuff we talked about previously in the meetings before. And I'm excited for that. I'll be on a little business trip. I'll be sure to join you remotely to discuss it.
You warned me already. You warned me already.
Yeah. The last thing real quickly, and thank you again for all the great questions, and I will get back to you about the salary. Thank you for catching it. The last thing is the August financials. There really isn't much to show in there because it's the first month and it was, not everything has been covered. We've all received a copy of it. If there's any questions, I'm happy to help you, but I felt that the bulk of tonight was to really give you guys this preview. I have copies if you'd like one, but you also have in your packet. And a huge shout out to Delcy for joining me tonight, and thank you for when.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Norm. All right, I'll turn it over to Ken.
I wasn't prepared to discuss next year's budget. We were just going to be adhering to the same process that we used in the past. I'd say it, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So, just trying to improve it. At this point, I believe it's department heads are putting together their proposed budgets, working with Neil, and on November 8th, we'll start the presentations by Neil, and then the department heads to the select board. We'll be meeting weekly for a while after November 8th. And, again, people are welcome to come in person or Zoom into those. One thing we did discuss, just have a handle on, is we're starting with shooting for a 3.5% merit pay increase for our employees. We do not have unions. So, that's a number the select board would like to hold on to. Whether we can or not, who knows at this point. And unless there are some general questions about our budget process, I'll just move into our financials.
Anyone?
Neil is put up, thank you, Neil. The revenue summary through the end of September, remembering we're on a calendar year, so we're actually 3/4 of the way through our year. I'll just highlight a couple of items as we go down that sheet. Timber tax is an item that the expectation is it will be catching up. And just even this evening when I had to come in, I had to sign off on some timber tax papers. The payment in lieu of taxes I've noted in the past, issues with Camp Methodius. We're continuing negotiations with them, and I'm optimistic that we'll reach an agreement. Interest and penalties, taxes is expected to catch up by year end. Motor vehicle payments, permits is a great one. It looks like it's running by the end of the year. We could be close to 100,000 over budget. Room and meals tax and highway block grant from the state in combination are expecting to come in roughly nearly $100,000 over budget there. Another good item. On the other side, flood control, we received $44,000 less than we had budgeted from the state. Neil is still trying to get a clarification on that, but the belief is it has something to do with the assessments of the different towns. Next big one, transfer station income should catch up, and note that pay by bag revenues are not yet have been transferred into this. Interest bank investments, as anticipated, stay below budget. And other income is higher. I think I mentioned last year, it's due to tax lien payments. One thing that's not included here is dollars from the American Rescue Plan. That would cover my summary on revenue. Anybody has any questions? Then going to the expenses, we do have to watch carefully.
Make sure you have it.
A couple of months a year, not knowing if we're gonna have, for plow, people are gonna have to be out running up large overtime amounts due to storms. So with that said, at this point, we're in pretty good shape. Want to point out that account 4153 legal is high, and that's due to a settlement of assessments with Fairpoint Communications that had gone back over a number of years. And that was a settlement with, well, with many towns throughout the state. And we were just one of those towns that got caught there. Personnel on the good side, we're expecting an $87,000 return from our health insurance that they're a, what's the term, Neil?
It's because it's a risk pool, it's the return of surplus. It's a premium policy.
Thank you. That was the word I was struggling. Planning should balance out over the year. Cemeteries, they'll have to return to us out of their reserves funds so that it would have come out at 100% of the budget. Solid waste is running high, but $7,000 of that actually should be transferred to the sewer expenses. So that should come out basically around budget. Welfare vendors is running high, but they have a trust fund so that anything over 100% of their budget will be picked up by the Human Services Trust Fund. And I've mentioned in the past that the long-term debt principal and interest is going to be about 100,000 over budget, and that was, let's say, due to a misunderstanding when the bonds were issued. We still expect over their life to receive the same kind of savings as we had anticipated when we presented that. The select board recently approved $7,500 expenditure for a deep analysis of the costs of different options for what to do with the Houston barn. And that may be something that I expect will be coming up probably as a warrant article next year on just what to do with the barn. If there are any specific questions, I'll probably defer to Dawn. He's on the Houston Barn Committee.
Do you anticipate some type of resolution on that? What's the time frame on that, Mr. Houston?
The resolution will be hopefully presented at town meeting. We're trying to put together right now all of the numbers, all of the various combinations, tear it down.
Yep.
To tear it down, you got a replacement building for the buildings and grounds, plus the storage that Heiser and other organizations have. So that's a cost. If you build it there, is one cost. If you build it at another site, that's another cost. And we're going to try to balance those against, of course, the cost of refurbishing the barn so it can be kept as its current use, plus the historical value. So all of that should be, we've hired a person, a company to put together all those numbers. The select board agreed to let us have $7,500 to pay for the
Okay.
gathering of all those
Yeah.
numbers. Hopefully by the end of November, that will come to fruition and the committee will look at it, present it to the select board, and then they will decide how and when, not how, but hopefully they certainly will present it to town meeting, because we need an answer. Keep it, not keep it, repair it, not repair it, build new. All those questions should be answered by the end of this study.
Would it be like a warrant, Ken, that would be presented to here, or it would just go?
I expect,
Just hypothetically.
held to it,
Yeah, yeah.
that it would be a separate, maybe a separate warrant article,
Okay.
depending on magnitude of, it, let's say.
Our intent with the committee would be as a separate warrant article. It's a
Okay.
separate decision totally. But the town folks need to know all the aspects of this thing.
Yeah, no, I think it's great.
We've been postponing this for about 10 years now. What brought it to fruition was the roof is in horrible shape.
Yeah.
And it's either got to be fixed, and that could be up to $80,000. So the decision was, rather than spend 80 and then tear it down the next year,
Yep.
let's do the study, spend 7,500 to get the numbers.
So the warrant article will be for 7,500,
No, that's just the cost to get the study information.
and we've already spent the 7,500?
Correct.
Yeah, we did include in the CIP budget for this year.
That's right. Came out of
funds
CIP.
that, part was used for the 7,500. Part was also put aside with the thought it would be maybe double in 2022. So there'd be at least enough money for the roof.
You could say the 7,500 has already left the barn.
Pardon?
You could say the 7,500 has already left the barn.
Yes.
Let's keep the comedy down.
I still haven't heard what you said.
Just say yes.
The $7,500 has already left the barn. He was.
Oh, yes,
He was
yes,
making
yes,
it joke.
yes. But
I was trying.
Rather than 80,000 leave the barn, we thought it was prudent, and so did the select board.
He makes it.
Is
And
it,
again, the idea is that the Heritage Committee for the state has basically said that we would be eligible to get up to $200,000 of state heritage money if we can get the matching funds to go with it. So 400,000, in my mind, would do a lot of work to that barn. It's got to be jacked up. It's got to have new foundation. Put it back down again, obviously, and repair some of the structure that's in there, the carrying beams, et cetera. And a new roof.
I apologize, but I'm not too familiar with warrants. I sometimes get a little wishy-washy. Is it possible, let's say it's gonna cost 400,000 to repair it, that's what the study shows. Can that be done in increments of a couple of years, like 1 year? We do 200 budget first within 2 years, or like raise up, what I'm saying, for the warrant, people like a 2 year, or it'll be 1 year lump sum?
Again, I can't answer that directly.
I'm just questioning
Right.
if you can do a warrant like that for,
But again, I think the warrant would have to be the justification Neil can straighten out to spend the money.
Yeah.
And hopefully half of that money is going to come from the Heritage Fund,
yeah,
which now will not be taxpayers' dollars.
Yeah.
And the other hopefully will become from fundraising.
Okay.
That should not be taxpayer dollars.
yeah,
Well, how that all comes out in the end, we don't
Yeah.
know yet.
okay. That's good. Okay. Thank you very much.
A different, for those of you who don't know, on a sad note, Chief Pecora is leaving
Oh,
as of the end of the month.
really?
And there will be a celebration. He's been with us for, I believe it's 21 years now. I think it's October 28th.
Yeah.
Is it public where he's going?
He's retired.
He just retired.
From,
I think he's going to keep working, but not certainly the same capacity.
So is there a search for a new chief, or?
we will probably, there is a search,
Will that be a
yes,
committee or
there will be
whatever?
something announced, hopefully in the very near future. I don't want to,
Right,
but
yeah.
Negotiations, right?
one thing I want to, highlight also is that with his leaving, he's built up a lot of accrued leave time that we have to pay him for. So there's probably in November, there's going to be a big expense related to that.
He well deserves it.
Yeah, thank
Yes,
you.
I mean, the select board tried to talk him out of it. And I've certainly been afraid of his retirement for a number of years now.
Is he accrued time off just for the year or past years?
He had a special contract, I believe, as police chief, so it
Okay,
goes back.
okay, all right, thank you.
I did not have anything else if there are any questions.
I have a nitpicky question. The economic development, I noticed that we've spent significantly less than was budgeted for the economic development. Is that just because of COVID or?
The regional development group working for us hasn't been putting in the kind of hours we expected. We have advertised for a part-time economic development director, and we will actually be interviewing a couple of applicants potentially at our next select board.
Oh, good.
And you had mentioned a little bit of issues with some collection of taxes from various locations. Have there been any update on that? And
I didn't catch what you said.
you provide an update to the budget committee about some issues of collecting taxes, I think from the camp. Is there any update on that at all from that you can provide?
We have had additional negotiations with St. Methodius,
Okay,
and I think they are going on the right track.
okay.
Other questions for Ken? All right, thank you, Ken. Kentucky Precinct. Turn it back over to Don.
Thank you. You have your sheet in front of you. They're continuing to work on improving the plant operation. Just a couple of items on here, just to highlight. Down on the 4130 line, halfway down the first page, the September 21 payment to the superintendent is in there in error. If you multiplied 8 times 12, you'd come up with certainly a lot more than 62. Somehow about $3,000 extra got put in there. That will be corrected next time around. The other item on the second page, most of the way down under 44335 water treatment. There's an item down there, water treatment other. We've spent $24,000 where we only budgeted $1. That's sort of a line that was a catch-all when we did the original budget, thinking that something weird came up. We needed a line to at least put money in it. That's we've been trying to change out the medium up at the water treatment plant. That's an ongoing process right now. It's quite expensive. That should solve some of the contamination problems. But that money will be taken out of the capital reserve, so it's not going to affect the budget per se. It's an extraordinary item, and that's why you have a capital reserve. And that's the explanation for that. Any other questions?
What are you using for a program for this budget? Are you using Excel?
I don't think it's Excel. It's one that was adopted specifically because it matches up with the MS sheets for the state. I can get you the answer for that.
Yeah, I was just curious. I mean, I understand errors happen. I've made a million of them myself.
It's just an error by the finance person putting.
Oh,
money
okay.
in the wrong
I didn't,
spot.
I didn't know if it was the software itself. Oh, okay, got it. Okay, that's cool. That's,
You're happy?
yeah, I'm happy. I'm very happy.
The other interesting thing, and this is sort of just an interesting FYI for those, and Neil's been certainly involved with this. We were notified by the highway department that one of the plans for improving one of the roads in town, Cedar Street, that may come up in maybe 2 years to fix that. And they gave warning to the precinct that if you want to, now's the time to plan for that whole improvement, whatever you want to do on Cedar Street for the water service there, which we've been sort of waiting to make sure we timed that with the highway department. That a correct assumption, Neil, on that?
But they don't have water on Cedar Street?
Pardon?
They don't have water on Cedar Street, or they do?
Good.
They do.
They're gonna be
I'm
redoing.
having
the road.
trouble here.
Sorry.
So if they get any changes to the pipes, they'd want to do it.
I see it, I see.
You know, it's been in there a long, long time. But they're gonna have to really tear that road up because the previous
Yeah.
installation of the drainage system there was totally bad. They didn't put the gaskets in pipes that they should have, so it's still leaking. And all these, water services are really, really old. And when you get a chance to do it, you want to do it before you lay down the new pavement.
Yeah, I walk down it all the time. You can see it on
Oh, yeah.
the side of the road, and the road is washing away.
Carriage lane needs some improvement, but they'll do it all at the same time. You want to add anything to that, Neil? or-
Just the current pipes kind of.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing's put in the way the maps show it is, it's just kind of a mess.
Everything is bastardized as it goes. Any other questions?
All right, seeing none, thank you, Don. Turn it over to Tom.
Oh, yes, sir.
Neil, thank you for letting us use your laptop tonight for presentation. Huh?
So,
I'm just gonna share it.
Yeah,
So
let's-
see it there.
So, the Hopkinton Village precinct is a lot simpler than the Cthulhu one, as always. These are full, profit and loss statement. Really, everything is on track and normal. The only thing that's really different is the other income. We had our first, planning board submission in, I think, 5 years. And so we had $100 planning fee that came in. And that's about it. Streetlights are still on, so. Yeah, any questions?
All right,
Sorry.
so that brings us to public comment. I see we have one member of the public. Would you care to comment? I don't know, Neil, we don't have any attendees, so going once, going twice. So now we have continued discussion of potential financial metrics by Tom again.
Great. Sorry, you can see that.
Yeah. So this is going off of what we talked about last time. I got kind of a giant list of stuff to go through, to try to come up with more information. Everything kind of fit into a lot of the comments and questions kind of fit in 3 major categories. One was trying to come up with a better way of getting income distribution information, and then more importantly, mapping income to property values. So we could come up with a better way of analyzing tax impacts other than tax rate. The second one was coming up with a better idea of how spending can occur with bonds. So we have a better long-term picture of what happens if we spend bonds or don't spend bonds, or capital improvement and that sort of thing. And then the third section was really more about looking at the long-term trends in the budget and how that broke down with state income. So things like if the town and school budget is increasing faster than inflation, how much of that impact comes from state revenue changes. So I didn't really get much done on that third part, the state income level stuff. A lot done on the bond scenario analysis, and I tried to do a lot into the income distribution analysis. What I found was that pretty much anywhere I looked, there was going to be sources of error. I think the only real true place that we can get that kind of data is from payroll analysis, and I don't know how we would get that data. Anything else, it was very error prone. Anything from the Census Bureau, anything from the government. It came to a place that I wouldn't really feel confident in anything. The one thing that I did think could be an option before we get to this is possibly sending out a townwide mailer with a survey, just asking people anonymously, what is your income and what is the value of your house? And yeah, I think that's kind of it might honestly be our best bet.
I wonder, I mean, you could potentially even do that, like there are electronic ways now that can be anonymous. If you could get somebody like Susan Covert's email to blast it. or
Right.
something.
Well, The way I thought, if we wanted to do something like that, I think the best way it could happen is if we did an actual townwide mailer. Because those aren't like we just hand, and it would just have a link that would take you to a survey online. You
Yeah.
could enter in, it'd be maybe 2, maybe 3 questions online. And then that would give us pretty much all the information we need. I think when we did this, when we did the townwide mailers for the COVID voting stuff, I don't think they're that expensive, right? They're $500.
Every door,
Every door,
that's about
Yeah.
$550 for the postage.
For the postage. So that way we could let everyone know relatively cheaply where to go, and then it would be just a couple questions. And there are some ways that we can do data verification to make sure that it's not being skewed in some weird way, but and then it would be maybe like 2, 3-ish questions. What's your home value and what is your income, and then maybe something else that we'd be interested in. So
Tom, I'm struggling with, we do that,
yes.
we get the results, what do we do with it?
So I think the question that we came to last time was, we know what a tax rate, we know what the, we have a budget change, and then we come up with a tax rate change. And then the only way that we can really tell how is this affecting the majority of people is to look at the median home value. And so that will tell us the median home value. Let's say your taxes are going to increase by $500 for any given thing for the median home value. But what it doesn't tell us is that median home, are they under the poverty level for income? In which case that that $500 is a lot, or is that income level at $200,000 or $300,000 a year? In which case that $500 is really not much at all. So that's the question it helps answer is how does the income distribution follow along with home values? Because home values, like if they just keep increasing every year, it doesn't really match with what the income is. So that's kind of what the question that's trying to chase down is. Yes. Sorry.
This may be way off base, but right now, home values are so skewed.
Yes.
So if we were to utilize that kind of information to help base our tax rate, and then you have that graph going back down, does that mean that we're automatically going to low, if we've utilized it to raise it, because right now homes really are up, it doesn't mean that households can
Right.
accommodate
Right.
their
Well,
living.
that's another part of that question, right? Is that, if a townwide property value changes, that doesn't mean anything about how much a person is going to pay in taxes. And so having an idea of what the incomes are attributable to those household values will give us a better picture of, for any given change in these budgets, how is it really impacting the household in terms of their income that they have available to spend. So something to think about. Not here. That was the other thing I worked on. But if anyone has other ideas, that'd be great. So should we talk about the bond stuff? Great. Did anyone get a chance to know Dr. This came out today, so I'm sorry. But the main goal here was to look at, in general, if there are large amounts of money to be spent places, how do the different ways of spending money compare to each other? So there's I'm using roads as an example here, as a kind of generic example, because we all know there's a relatively large amount of money that needs to go into fixing or repairing the roads. It's also a good example because the cost of construction for the road is increasing at an extremely high rate compared to other things. So it's a good example of kind of the impact of high. So the general scenario is there's an $8 million deferred maintenance into the roads. An $8 million hole that needs to be spent to bring the roads up. So there's a couple different ways that we could spend money to. We could do it without bonds. We could do it with bonds. So if we did it without bonds, we could just spend. We could just do a warrant article for $8 million in the spring and just raise all that money and spend it. I'm not going to try to defend it here, but it's a good, it's a good comparison. That's kind of the baseline. You can save up into a CIP fund for 10-ish years. I went with 10 years here instead of 20 years, just because, but you could save money to capital reserve and then spend it after 10 years. Or you could spend a certain amount every year for a period of about 10 years. In the cases where it's 10% a year, it starts off at the 10% level and then it increases to match whatever the inflation was over time and then it decreases. So in all of those scenarios, you start off and then it increases in payments and then it decreases in payments. But in general, the idea is you take a chunk out of it every year. And then you can do similar stuff with bonds where you can do a lump sum in bonds, spend immediately, or you could do smaller bonds every year and do the same thing over time. So going through these, so what I'll do is I'll go through what it kind of looks like if we did each one of these scenarios and how it compares in terms of netting out. In terms of key factors, these are the important ones. The ones that are bolded are the really important ones. We're looking at it. So there's the current interest rates, which kind of are jumping all over the place right now, but I went with 1.6. That seemed to be a goodish approximation for right now. Long-term interest rates are, that comes from the 10-year bond yield average of the last 20 years. So it's a relatively good approximation for what, if we looked at the last 20 to 30 years, what we expect our average long-term interest rates to be. Then we have the similar for two inflations, what our current inflation level is this year, and also what our long-term inflation is. So on average over the last 20 years, inflation's been about 2.1%. Short-term inflation, so like the last year, it's about 5-something%. Now it's jumping around too, so 5.4. So then there's also the construction inflations. So these ones are pretty interesting. And I actually, there's a federal index for this as well as a statewide index for this. And the statewide index follows the federal index extremely well, but it only goes to 2020 data. The federal index goes to last month. So because they trended really well for the short term, I went with the federal inflation rate. So that's the inflation in road building costs. So long-term average about 4%, and the last couple months it's been about 10% increase, which is crazy. And then you have your savings rate. So if we were to, this one doesn't really matter too much because it's so smallish, but if we were to be saving up money into a capital improvement fund, into a reserve fund, that's what we'd be making on that money in a savings-ish. It doesn't, that could be a lot of different stuff, but.
How do you take into account the consumers?
So
if somebody is living off their credit card and credit card interest.
Yes. So wait, you mean how does that factor into this?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking to, for whatever reason, increase taxes so that you have money for roads down the road, saving, X%. But somebody, in order to pay their property taxes, has to borrow money in effect at the credit card.
Yes.
Which is 10%. So aren't you, in that sense, hitting the poorer or the lower income residents very hard?
So in all of these scenarios, the tax rate is going to change. In all of these scenarios, the money has to get spent. And so you can't look too much at what any individual single person is have to spend in taxes. It's just in net. If we have to spend $8 million, what is the cheapest way that we can spend that $8 million? Does that make sense? Because I mean, some people might have to do that, some people might not. And it's, that's more of an individual impact as opposed to like a extremely large impact of here's a lump sum of money that we need to spend on. I think that'd be more of an argument for whether or not we should or should not spend $8 million as opposed to what's the best way to spend it. So in the first scenario, it would be not taking any bonds. So in the base case where we just do warrant for $8 million in the spring, we spend $8 million as quickly as possible. This is a straightforward case. It comes to about a $10.24 tax rate increase, and that would be $3,155 per household. That'd be one time, it'd be a one-time impact. The median household would have to spend $3,100. But they do it that first year and then not do it the next year.
So just, okay, median household.
Median household. So then the next case is you could raise the money into a capital reserve fund over 10 years. And what ends up happening is that $8 million in road budget increases to 11.8 million over the 10 years due to the construction cost increase. So we would need somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.1 million yearly for going to the CIP fund. That tax rate would be a 1.52 or $1.52 tax rate increase, or $467 per household. And then in total, in today's dollars, what that means that we'd spend in total is $10.3 million. So why that number is different? So after 10 years, we would need $11.8 million, but in today's dollars, that's only 10.3 million.
Is that 467 for 10 years?
That's
or
for
just
10 years.
So each year for 10
Each year.
years?
And there's a chart at the end of this that compares all these things.
Okay, sorry,
So it's easier to
sorry.
look at it, but so I'll try to get through this a little faster.
Yeah, sorry.
So then the next one is, instead of doing either of those, we would just every year for 10 years, we would take a big chunk out. So we'd spend somewhere around $800,000 plus whatever the inflation increase was that year. Spend it, we'd raise it in a warrant article and then spend that money that year as quickly as possible. And that comes to about $8.4 million total that we'd spend in today's dollars. This one is a lot harder to factor the tax rate impact because the town valuation can change fairly rapidly in 10 years. So it's very hard to figure out what that tax impact is going to be. So then the other scenario is with bonds. Looking at a 10-year scenario with bonds, there's the base case where we do a warrant article for an $8 million bond in the spring, and then spend it as quickly as possible. So over the next 10 years, we would make, and there's also a lot of different ways that you can structure bond payments, with flat interest or decreasing payments or flat principal payments. You can do a lot of different stuff. So in this case, I just went with flat principal, decreasing interest, because it's the easiest way to kind of model it out. But in that case, it would be $8.6 million in actual payments, but in today's dollars, only $7.8 million that we'd spend. So we need to spend $8 million. If we took out a bond right now for $8 million, we would only spend $7.8 million to do the work, which is interesting. And the reason is because the current bond rate is so far below inflation that we just end up spending less money over time. The next case is we do, instead of doing one large bond, we do a bond every single year for the next 10 years. This ends up being a 20-year process because you have a 10-year bond every year for 10 years. So in 10 years, we still have payments that we're making into year 20. So in that case, it would be $8.7 million spent in current dollars. And in this scenario, after 5 years, I switched the interest rate from 1.6 to 3.2, just because I don't think it's very reasonable to expect a 1.6% interest rate for the next 10 years. So this one's again very dependent on a lot of different stuff, but the total we can spend is about $8.7 million. And then there's the last case, which is very similar to the first one, but it's just at the 3.2% interest rate instead of our current 1.6. So in that case, it still comes out pretty good, but we spent $8.4 million in current dollars. So in terms of how this actually nets out, a better way to look at it is this chart. So you have the different cases on the left, the total impact. So this is in today's dollars, how much money would we spend? And then you have the total payments. And the reason why those two are different is because we'd have to pay the same amount of money over time, but that money is worth less in the future. So it's, so that's why the total payments are higher, but in today's dollars, it's lower. Then you have the yearly impact to the median household. So how much a median household would have to pay every single year. but those are for different years. So the duration of how long that would be is on the right. So, so obviously like the base case, $3,000 in year one, but it's only 1 year. And then if you bonded 10% every year for 10 years, it's $173 a year, but for 20 years. So that's pretty much it. And then there's questions that.
I have a question on, I guess it's kind of specific on roads, but what is our kind of like, how long does it take us to accumulate approximately 8 million in deferred maintenance on roads? Like, so my question, I guess, is looking at the last scenario. If we do that for 20 years, I would guess that 5-10 years into it, we're going to have accumulated more other additional maintenance we would have to do. Yeah.
I think the point here is that we already have accumulated $8 to $10 million worth of deferred maintenance. We're already there.
No, I understand.
Okay,
Yeah.
I didn't hear your question then correctly.
It is substantially cheaper to maintain roads than to rebuild roads.
Right.
So once you get them done, providing you maintain them, cost on them does go down.
And I would also say that part of this, I mean, so this was meant to use the roads as a general case because it's an easy one to think about. But in reality, with the roads, you would probably want to tie that with an increase in maintenance budget. So as like if you went with the last case, bonding 10% every year, you'd probably, as those roads get improved, you'd probably want to increase the maintenance budget along with that. So how that actually nets out into a final impact is more in depth.
Just for your benefit, over the last 5 or 6 years, we have had 2 bonds relating to roads and bridges and culverts. And we have been increasing the maintenance budgets for roads. Starting to try to chip away.
And a lot of those bonds have been used to replace culverts, and 100 year culverts have been put in. So those are good. Most of us will forget about.
When we talk about this, we really should say roads, bridges, and culverts. That's got to be our understanding. That's the order of magnitude.
There's also, I mean, it's been noted before that like in the base case, say we just got $8 million tomorrow, we wouldn't be able to spend that money immediately. We think it would take several years, if not more.
Especially in this environment where you can't get companies to come in to pave or put in culverts or whatever.
Right, and so that becomes an interesting problem as well, because while right now we can borrow money so cheaply, if we borrow the money now but we can't spend it, that ends up hurting us more than if we didn't. I think the last time this came up, when we were talking about bonds last year, someone made a comment, why don't we just bond the entire budget? I mean, that kind of almost makes sense, but if you can't spend the money immediately, then, especially at 10% increases in your construction costs, that could be a problem.
Would it be a logical assumption that if we theoretically, we did the $8 million, that we could probably spend that out in construction over probably 4 to 5 years? Because I think Dan has said we could probably only do about $800 to $1 million worth of construction, him doing some and some hiring it out. But you got the question of even getting people to do the work at this point. But there's also, am I correct in thinking that just if we had everything perfect right now, we should spend about $600,000 a year just to maintain that level for that perfect setup, because it'd be spread out over a number of years. So we're really talking 8 million to fix things that are totally bad. And then we've got to add about 600 in theory on top of that to keep that as it's built out. Because you need to chip and seal probably every 5 years.
Top coats every 10.
Right.
Depending on traffic.
Right. You can't do all the same thing for everything because it doesn't all happen at once.
So another interesting question is that this pops up not just in terms of roads, it pops up right now in terms of anything that we need to spend a large amount of money on. And if we can't spend that much money on the road, there's only so much we can spend on roads in the next year or two. Are there other things that we can spend money on that would help offset future payments? Are there other capital improvement things that need to be spent money on that we know are gonna come up in the next 2 or 3 years? Can we spend the money on it now because it's so cheap to do that, so that when we do need to raise, instead of raising that money in 3 years, we can then spend that money on the roads? I don't know the answer.
You'd have to probably look at the CIP spreadsheet to see if this makes any sense. But, and again, that's laid out, so if you don't buy a fire truck that's good for 20 years, you don't buy it at 15 just because you want to, you've got the money, you wait until you work your way through that.
And
I think on the, off the cuff, from looking at it from the CIP standpoint, there isn't anything that we need desperately to do that you would use this kind of money for, other than culverts, bridges, and roads.
Really though, according to these numbers, we shouldn't be putting money in CIP for that fire truck.
Right.
We should be bonding the fire truck,
Right.
which is a different.
That's what I'm trying to say, because if we know, let's say that we know that we need to spend another 2, but we can't spend the money on the roads now. We know we can spend some of it now, some of it in 3 years. We know we're gonna need the fire truck in 3 years. Why not just buy the fire truck now while we can, because it'll be so much cheaper. Because if we need to buy a fire truck for $8 million, we save ourselves $200,000 by buying it. So it might not be, we might get another 2 or 3 years out of it, but we'll save $200,000 by buying it today. So I don't know how that nets out.
But am I correct that if we bond $8 million, that has to be designated for a specific purpose?
Right. Like,
So we wouldn't be able to get that money and then say, oh, we can't get workers to come and do this.
no. I'm not saying like.
No, I'm just saying.
And spend it on fire trucks, but like bond whatever we can on roads, and then also do other bonds for other things that we know that we can spend money on in the next 3 years. We might not extremely need it, I mean, in terms of the school budget for boilers, like, that's a huge budget item that we could save hundreds of thousands of dollars by buying it today instead of tomorrow.
I would like you to make this presentation of the CIP committee, which we should be meeting in the next couple of weeks. But that, this committee and that committee really needs to look at this kind of thing, where, but we're normally visioned, I think, by the public of cutting costs. We also have the obligation to recommend, I think, spending more money in an area that we think we should.
And if we've gotten to a point where we have these known needs and money is very cheap
Right.
right now, that has to be considered.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep.
When do you guys meet?
Pardon?
When do you guys meet?
Neil's going to come up with a date pretty soon, but it's going to be the next 2 weeks, certainly.
Because that would have an impact, if you guys made a recommendation, let's say, to the select board's planning in the school districts, then we would potentially use something like this if needed, correct, is what you're suggesting?
Well, I think, this is a model.
Yeah, of course, yeah, no, it's a great
getting
model.
flushed out a lot more, but I think if we at least looked at it for the elephant in the room that we know we've got.
Yeah,
And, you folks have already gone through your $10 million bonding, but there may be future in 2 or 3 years that you got to come up with something else. But I think this is a great drill, I think, that the townsfolk need to see and understand the order of magnitude of this thing.
yeah, great to grow.
And I mean, these are all kind of generic cases, but if there's more specific cases, like especially if it comes to roads, I mean, I'm happy to build out. If, we know, I don't know how much of road improvement over time would have to be, but I'm sure those numbers exist. So if there are more detailed numbers, I'm happy to flush out the model to be more precise.
I think rough numbers do exist. And, I'm sure he already has a handle on it.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing
That
this.
was great.
So Ken, you want me to come up with
I thought it was CIP was gonna. I'm not sure that I'd be too interested in proposing an $8 million bond after we just did more. But it's certainly worth, looking into. Thank you for doing it.
Yeah.
Well, particularly valuable because time is of the essence, given the premise here.
Yeah. Yeah, this sort of stuff definitely won't make sense in a couple years.
Yeah, maybe even
Maybe
6
even-
months.
yeah, maybe.
I mean,
I mean, we don't know what's going to happen at the federal level in terms of, additional stimulus funds. And if they come down with infrastructure, you're never going to be able to get a contractor.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And prices are going to go sky high.
Right.
For some period of time.
Right.
Right, we're gonna start hearing about stagflation.
Great.
Really great, Tom. Other questions for Tom or comments?
No, thank you, Tom.
So that brings us to any other business. Is there any other business?
Mark asked for the assessment information, which is why I stayed.
That's, oh, it didn't make it onto the, but Neil, please.
I think you were just looking at,
I'm just looking at the agenda.
wanted the assessment value, just was in your packet. Yep. So average question is this. This being also the credits and exemptions, the numbers.
Assessment, yeah.
Did you have a screen for that, Tom? That's pretty,
It's on the Google Doc.
that's a pretty impressive list.
So what I did is each exemption and credit, the numbers and the dollar. amount. We don't have 2021 dollar amounts because we don't have a tax rate yet. And then to see the impact per year, it's carried out into the columns. So you can see the assessed value and then the full amount of the tax value. 2017 was 419,000. It was up to 506 in 2020. So those are the tax value of the exemptions.
So would you expect this last column would be more than that?
Yes, because the tax rate will be higher in 2021 than it was in 2020.
It's moving towards 600,000.
It probably will be somewhat close to that. As you see, the tax value does drop when it's the rebound.
Yep.
Of course, we started to jump up from 19 to 20 because all the elderly exemptions were, the values were updated after the rebound.
That list, when you finally perfect it, should go in the town report. That's impressive.
And the other list was just the increase in the valuation each year.
Do you have that available real quick to pop up there? Please, thank you.
Any exemptions or credits for poverty? Poverty,
Only for seniors.
only for seniors.
The criteria for, but I think it's a couple can't make over 60,000 and an individual can't make over 40,000. And you have to have assets, not including your house, under 150,000.
For any of the exemptions listed.
For elderly.
Oh, for elderly, okay.
The state limits us to what we can and can't do exempt for, right? And they basically replace with.
Yes.
There is no
Yeah.
poverty.
There is no
There's
problem.
just these ones.
Right, so we had talked about this last time. If I'm an able-bodied working family, parents of who are like 40, I'm not getting anything.
You're not,
Correct.
there's no option for us to give you that.
Right.
So the next reevaluation is 2022, or is it 6 years?
It's 2019, so it's 2020.
2020, okay, so it's 5 years, right? All right, okay.
Kind of estimating, looking at the building permits and stuff, we're probably going to see an increase in 2022 similar to the almost 4 million in 2021. Based on building permits. We've had a lot more building over the last 2 years than we had in the last 10 put together.
And just so everybody remembers, we had the discussion about this last year. The budget committee recommended that we assume the assessment would go up 0.5%. Select board went up with 0.5%. The school board went with 0. And, we would like to come to the same number this time. Fair enough, Norm?
Yeah, I think the two boards need to talk about it in person. I think, for budgeting purposes, I think it's really difficult.
Not for budgeting purposes, for tax rate purposes.
Well, I think explaining it to the community also was very confusing for some last year. I mean, they see two different numbers on a presentation, they kind of point who's telling the truth, I guess you could say, but, it's the truth.
No, I agree with you, but I think that this kind of chart, it gives you credence to making your decision one way or the other.
Well, to a point, because what if you have no other school districts doing it?
Mhm.
Why should Hopkinton be the first?
I agree with you.
No, that's just, for me, it's just an observation from this side. I mean,
Whenever you're estimating, you're making assumptions, so it just matters what assumptions you decide.
I wasn't here last year, so I just want to make sure that I understand really quickly. The reevaluation year is when that's like the home value a homeowner is locked into until the next reevaluation year, right? So even if the assessment goes up in 2020 from 2019, I'm not actually paying taxes on that increased number.
No, that increase largely is new homes,
Okay,
your addition that you added, the deck that you added,
Okay.
physical changes to the property.
so it is money that we do expect to actually come in.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, because the
Not tax money.
No,
It's not tax money.
Yes,
No,
yes.
no, because the money doesn't come from the amount that we get from taxes doesn't depend on the town. It depends on the budget that we set. So whatever budget we set, that's the money that we get.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
The
fair.
tax
It
rate
is
comes from the valuation.
money we could get in if we kept the tax rate the
If
same,
you take.
It lowers everybody's tax.
right?
But a little, it lowers your taxes because you're collecting the same amount from more property.
The way I look at it is, what is the denominator you use to collect all the money? What do you divide it by to come out of the tax rate?
Yes,
So if you go $4 million higher and the denominator, your tax rate is slightly less.
but the money that comes to the town is the same.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
so I can say from the school district side that this is a discussion the finance committee is looking at, and it's a discussion we plan on having with you in our joint meeting, which is appropriate, to have, so.
You know what I'm going to argue about.
No, I think it's just, I think what's good about this, Ken, is that we talk about this in the beginning of this process. Just like we're trying to start this budget process earlier for this committee. We get this on right out of the gate, and then we start working on our budgets. And
Yeah, no, I agree.
yeah.
Did you resolve, Neil, the question of whether the budget committee will be invited to that joint meeting?
But it's a public meeting,
Okay,
they're always welcome. I don't think they'll be part of it. That would be a little too unusual.
no, we just want to listen.
But I think budget committees members have attended in the past, I know.
Yep. Is there a date for that? Yep.
Yes.
Yes, the 26th, Tuesday, the 26th, at 5:30 in Hopkinton Middle High School.
30, you say?
So other questions? Neil, did you just hang around just for that?
Yes.
I wish I had known that that was the case. We would have done that sooner in the
I
agenda.
actually really like the presentation, so I was glad to see.
Okay, well, sorry for
Okay, no.
keeping you.
No problem.
It was keeping me honest.
I didn't know.
So is there any other business from anybody?
Not yet.
I don't hear any, so that leads us to a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? We don't want to hear.